Kevin Love once had 31 points and 31 rebounds in the same game, while on the other side of the spectrum, PJ Tucker played 37 minutes in a game without taking a single shot attempt. Today we're covering the weirdest stat lines in NBA history, part 2. During his prime with the Houston Rockets, James Harden was not only one of the best players in the league, but also one of the most elite scorers that the game had ever seen. Houston's offense completely revolved around Harden. Whether he was a distributor or a scorer, he would frequently call for an ISO and just go to work. This 2-game stretch in the 2019-20 season would be a prime example of just how amazing Harden was as a scorer. The first game would come against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs were a husk of a team in their first season after LeBron James left to join the Los Angeles Lakers. Harden took full advantage of this and cooked Cleveland's entire roster. He would finish the game with 55 points and 10 3-pointers while shooting an extremely efficient 58.8% from the field and 55.6% from 3. He would follow up this performance with another amazing scoring night against the Orlando Magic. The Magic were another team that was amongst the worst in the league, and they had no one on their roster that had a chance of stopping James Harden, especially when he was on one of the best scoring stretches of his career. Harden would end this game with 54 points and 10 threes while shooting a mind-blowing 61.3% from the field and 66.7% from 3. Shockingly enough, Harden would only put up 36 minutes in this contest and would still put up this incredible stat line. After the game, then Orlando Magic wing Evan Fournier was quoted as saying, "I feel like we lost against just him tonight. He's the MVP for a reason. We talked about it in pregame that'll take shots and we'll just have to live with the results." He did not miss tonight. James Harden joined Steph Curry as the only players at the time to hit 10 threes in back-to-back games. But Harden would become the only player in the history of the NBA to ever accomplish this feat while also scoring 50-plus points. Up next is another mind-blowing game from James Harden. 2 seasons prior to his back-to-back 50-point games with 10 threes, Harden would make history once again against the Orlando Magic. For any player, a triple-double is one of the most difficult feats to pull off, but this was not the case for Harden. He torched the Magic for 60 points, 10 rebounds, and 11 assists. He would become the only player in NBA history to ever have a 60-point triple-double. This was one of the most unforgettable performances that would lead to Harden winning the MVP in the 2017-18 season. Despite his incredible all-around performance in this game, the Rockets would narrowly escape with a victory by a final score of 114-107. After the game, he was quoted as saying, "I just gave it all I had tonight. We all did. We all fought for 48 minutes. We got key stops when we needed to, and we made big shots." When asked about how it felt to make history, Harden said, "It's a good feeling, I guess. Just try to go out there and make an impact every single night on the game, however I can. Whether it's scoring, rebounding, assists, steals, whatever it is. And tonight, I guess I was doing everything." The next player on this list didn't even attempt one single shot in a playoff game. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum of Harden's generational scoring ability is PJ Tucker. Tucker has never been much of a scorer, but in his prime, he was one of the best sharpshooters from the corner in the league. But as he continued to age, he has evolved into a player that, for the most part, refuses to shoot the ball. Despite this, he still receives a hefty amount of minutes for the Philadelphia 76ers. Tucker is a feisty defender and an incredible veteran presence to have on the court even with his lack of scoring ability. This season in the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Boston Celtics, Tucker would make history as the only player in NBA history to not attempt a shot from the field or a free throw while clocking in 37 minutes. This was the most minutes played without a shot of any kind in the playoffs since the inception of the shot clock in the 1954-55 season. However, this is nothing new for Tucker. The 0-point performance was one of 98 other times that it occurred in his career. Our next stat line comes from a player who did not accomplish a single thing in this performance. While Tucker was able to affect the game in different ways besides scoring in his playoff game against the Celtics, the same cannot be said about Tony Snell in his lackluster performance against the Utah Jazz. Along with not scoring a single point in the 28 minutes that he played in, Snell would also not record a stat of any kind outside of minutes played. Snell did not record a single point, rebound, assist, steal, block, or even a turnover. Outside of having a great cardio workout, Snell would miss both of his field goal attempts and record a single personal foul. Despite this being one of the poorest single game performances in NBA history, Snell would go on to play around a decade after this game. He would love the world to forget. Up next is another player that got a great cardio workout in and nothing else in their more than forgettable performance. While Snell had an awful performance in this game against the Jazz, there would only be one other player in the history of the league with a more laughable stat line. Snell would put up his snooze fest of a game in 28 minutes of play. However, he would be one up 6 years prior by Joel Anthony during his time with the Miami Heat. In the Heat's game against the Portland Trail Blazers, Anthony recorded 29 minutes, 1 turnover, and 4 personal fouls. Anthony would serve as the 6th man for Miami in this game, and despite his goose egg stats across the board in terms of points, rebounds, assists, blocks, and steals, the Heat would still come out with a 107-100 win in overtime. The next player on this list only played 13 minutes, but they made the most of it. Shavlik Randolph is a name that many NBA fans are probably not too familiar with. Unless he was a member of your favorite team, it makes sense if you've never heard of this name before. In his 8 years in the NBA, he would play in 146 games and start in only 7 of them. His career high in minutes per game would come in his 2nd year in the league with the Philadelphia 76ers in the 2006 to 2007 season, where he averaged 13.8 minutes per game. While this may not sound like a lot of time on the floor, Randolph made the most of his minutes that he was given in a game against the Cleveland Cavaliers during his time with the Boston Celtics. In only 13 minutes, Randolph would pack the stat sheet, especially for a role player. He recorded 16 points and 7 rebounds. There's a good chance that Randolph would have been kept in the game for longer, but he recorded 6 personal fouls in his short 13-minute appearance. Up next is a player that came up just short of joining one of the most prestigious clubs in NBA history. Despite being a solid starting big throughout the majority of his 10-year NBA career, no one could see this mind-blowing performance coming from Spencer Hawes. During his 10 years in the league, Hawes would suit up for the Sacramento Kings, Philadelphia 76ers, Cleveland Cavaliers, Los Angeles Clippers, Charlotte Hornets, and Milwaukee Bucks. This stat line that seems impossible from a player of his caliber came in a game against the Indiana Pacers during his time with the 76ers. Hawes would finish the contest with 18 points, 16 rebounds, 8 assists, and 7 blocks. He came just 2 assists and 3 blocks short of joining one of the most exclusive clubs in NBA history. While some players struggle to pull off triple doubles, only 4 players in the history of the league have been capable of finishing a game with a quadruple double. Only Nate Thurmond, Alvin Robertson, Hakeem Olajuwon, and David Robinson have been able to accomplish the mind-blowing feat. But Hawes would just be a few minutes away from being the 5th player in history to pull it off. Despite falling just a little short, Hawes would still make history in this performance. He joined Olajuwon and Charles Barkley as the only players at the time to record 18 points, 16 rebounds, 8 assists, and 7 blocks in a game since the 1985 season. Despite the next stat line on the list coming from a relatively unknown player, he would have a night to remember and go for an unexpectedly crazy stat line. Although he had a very successful 13-year career in the NBA, Reggie Evans is a player that not too many fans remember. During his time in the league, he played for the Seattle Supersonics, Denver Nuggets, Philadelphia 76ers, Toronto Raptors, Los Angeles Clippers, Brooklyn Nets, and the Sacramento Kings. This unreal performance would come during his time with the Nets in a game against the Portland Trail Blazers. Although Evans is not the most memorable player, he is statistically one of the best rebounders in the history of the NBA. If he had played enough minutes during his time in the league to be in the career record books, he would place 2nd in NBA history in career rebounding percentage at 21.8%, finishing only behind Dennis Rodman. Despite Evans pulling in 21.8% of every rebound that occurred when he was on the floor, no one saw this amazing performance coming. He would finish the game with 26 rebounds. He would also record 22 points. This would be a career high in both points and rebounds in a single game for Evans, and it was one of the 3 games that he would score over 20 points. While 20-20 games are not the most uncommon thing in the NBA, this becomes an unreal stat line after realizing the player that accomplished it. This next stat line was one of the worst single game performances in NBA history. Today, Jrue Holiday is known as one of the most important players on the contending Milwaukee Bucks roster. He's one of the league's best perimeter defenders and a very solid player on the offensive end. However, during his time with the 76ers in the 2013 season, Holiday would go on to have one of the worst single game cold streaks in the history of the NBA. Jrue would finish the game with 24 shots. While this would typically result in a 30 to 40 point performance for him, this was far from the case. He would finish the game only making 2 out of his 24 shot attempts for a shooting percentage of 8.3%. Along with this, he missed all 5 of his 3-point attempts and even went 1 for 9 in shots 5 feet or closer to the basket. Holiday would make history for all the wrong reasons that night, and at the time of the game, became the only player since the 1985-86 season to shoot that many shots and only make 2 of them. Up next is a center that is relatively unknown for doing much work on the boards, having a dominant rebounding performance. Nikola Vucevic has always been a very solid rebounder, but he would take things to a new level in this game. While being a very talented big, he is more of a stretch 5 rather than being a paint dominant player. Despite this, he would completely change up his style of play in this game and accomplished one of the most unbelievable stat lines in the 2012-13 season. As a member of the Orlando Magic, Vucevic would record 20 points, 29 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks in a game against the Miami Heat. What made this feat even more impressive was that Vucevic was able to completely dominate the boards against the Heat team that would go on to win the NBA title in that season. Vucevic's 29 rebounds would end up being the most in a single game in the 2012-13 season. After this game, many Magic fans felt much better about the haul that they got after trading Dwight Howard to the Los Angeles Lakers. What if I told you one of the most impressive rebounding performances from a big man in the history of the league would come from a very unlikely source? You most likely know Kevin Love for his time as a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. During his time in Cleveland and his single season with the Miami Heat, Love was known as an ideal stretch 4. After joining the Cavs, he put in a lot of effort in shedding weight and improving his outside shot to be a better fit stylistically on the contending team. Despite this, when he was a member of the Minnesota Timberwolves and playing his own style of basketball, he was one of the best big men that the league had to offer. When he was the #1 option on a team, Love was a monster in terms of scoring and on the boards. He was a walking 20-point, 20-rebound performer, but he would take things to a whole new level in a game against the New York Knicks. Love would finish the contest with a ridiculous 31 points and 31 rebounds. At the time that he accomplished this feat, he was the first player to have a 30-point, 30-rebound game since Moses Malone in the 1982 season, and was the first player to pull in 30 rebounds since Charles Barkley in the 1996 season. After the game, Love was quoted as saying, "It seemed like no matter what anybody did, I was going to go and get those rebounds. I don't know what to tell you. I impressed myself. I don't even know what to say, to be honest with you." Love himself could not even believe the ridiculous stat line that he recorded that night, and it was arguably the most impressive single game performance of his potential Hall of Fame caliber career. This next stat line is a perfect example of why one of the top players of this generation was given one of the coolest nicknames in league history. Chris Paul has been one of the best pure point guards that the game has ever seen. I know he has a lot of haters, but he does his job well. His traditional and timeless style of basketball has led him to having an extremely long career in the NBA. He will be a first ballot Hall of Famer most likely, and is one of the best passers that has ever touched an NBA court. As a result of this, he was given the nickname of Point God, and this game is a prime example of why he received the title. During his time with the Los Angeles Clippers, Paul put on one of the most impressive passing exhibitions in NBA history. He would finish the game with 20 points and 20 assists. While this is impressive itself, Paul would also accomplish this without committing a single turnover. He became the first player to pull off this feat since Ricky Green in 1984. The Clippers would dominate the game and win by a final score of 133-105. After the game, Paul's pick and roll partner DeAndre Jordan was quoted as saying, "He didn't have any turnovers? He is a legend." Man, what if I told you a player almost pulled off one of the toughest feats in basketball in only 3 quarters? As we previously mentioned, a quadruple double is one of the most difficult feats to accomplish in basketball. Only 4 players have been able to pull off this feat in the history of the game. But there was one player that came extremely close while only playing in 3 quarters. Larry Bird was one of the best players to ever play in the NBA. He was ahead of his time as a shooter and was an all-around player that could do a little bit of everything. In this game against the Utah Jazz, Bird would go on to record 30 points, 12 rebounds, 10 assists, and 9 steals. He was just 1 steal short away from joining the list of players that had quadruple doubles. Bird would be pulled for the entirety of the 4th quarter and would not return to this game. Despite this, if he had played in the 4th quarter, there is no doubt in my mind that Bird would have been able to easily accomplish the quadruple double, and coming this close in only 3 quarters is unbelievable in and of itself. Comment down below which stat line surprised you the most, and also hit that subscribe button and like the video.